Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. Let's jump in with today's warm-up topic. Tanner, your D&D group of 5 is suddenly and permanently moving to a D&D group of 4. One of your players is leaving for whatever reason, and the rest of the players love having 5 characters. So you now get to create a character that is actually your character you will be playing. What character do you create?
Okay, for my character, since I would not want, especially since I'm the DM, I don't want too much involvement. What I'd probably do is I would take an existing NPC, like from the story, and I just embody them, and they now tag along, right? And at that point, it just depends on what it is. So I'm gonna, in order to really go with the spirit of the warm-up, I'm going to say that it is a halfling. A halfling who specifically is like overly empathetic. You know, that's kind of like their character flaw/quirk, where they're just like, anytime that a player is like hurt at all or inconvenienced, they're like, oh my goodness, how are you even alive? You know, like they just like get overly concerned. And that's kind of the character quirk. In terms of what they are, I'm going to go with cleric, just simple cleric. You know, I think that's like, in terms of an NPC that I would have fun going back to over and over again, I think that having a cleric who's like overly empathetic, and maybe like a little nosy, you know, like trying to get confessions or the equivalent of that from players and being like, hey, you can trust me, you know. And I think it's a good chance for one of my favorite types of humor, which is annoying people. No, I'm joking, but I think that would work out well. Let's say that he's a halfling cleric named Dunder.
I love that. It's funny that you say halfling cleric, because in the campaign I'm running right now, like a lot of sessions back, I actually did introduce an NPC who was a halfling cleric to tag along with the group for a while. Nice. So, you know, been there, done that. But welcome back, listener, to How to Be a Better DM. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, here with my cohort, Tanner Weyland.
Hello, guys.
And today we are here to help you learn how to craft better stories for your players as you DM sessions of D&D. And today we're actually going to talk about a big challenge, which is how to engage players who don't necessarily seem to be engaged. And before we get to today's topics, let's go through some housekeeping items as usual.
Perfect.
So, this Saturday, October 1st at 4 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. I will be hosting the one-shot for September. And if you want to watch that, that is at betterdungeonmaster.com/watch. All of the slots to play are actually full. And we had to reschedule a couple times, but we finally got it nailed down, and it's going to happen this Saturday for sure.
Great.
And then the next one shot is actually happening on October 22nd. I believe that's happening at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And again, you can also watch that on betterdungeonmaster.com/watch. That is being hosted by our friend and guest of the show, Bone Daddy Rob, from This Dungeon is Occupied, which is a podcast similar to How to Be a Better DM. And then if you want to sign up for the next one-shot, or even just get on the list for any one-shots coming up, just go to betterdungeonmaster.com/one-shot and sign up. It's free, and it's first come, first serve.
Great. Yeah, I think those both sound awesome. You got a little tidbit of what your one-shot's going to be about?
Yes.
This Saturday?
Yes, I do. It's one that I've run before, actually. So if you have had me run it for you, you'll get a more polished version. But essentially, you and your companions get a letter from one of your friends from the town of Autumn's Grace in the North Prefecture of Fairwind. And this letter indicates that strange things have been happening in the town. A few families have gone missing, and then they've inexplicably reappeared without any notice. And their behavior has been modified somehow. They're acting strangely. And this friend of yours, Teresa, is concerned, though no one else in the town shares her concerns, even though the third family of kind of this string of events has recently disappeared and then reappeared. And they're happening more close together. But anyways, that's just a little taste of the one-shot you'll be getting this Saturday if you watch it or play.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Next housekeeping item is I want to give a special shout out to all of you Spotify listeners out there. I looked the other day. We have 13 reviews. Pretty good reviews, actually. I haven't figured out how to see... sorry, they're not reviews. They're ratings. 13 ratings on Spotify. I haven't figured out how to see reviews, but they're pretty good. And there's no names attached to them, so I can't thank you by name. But thank you so much, you Spotify listener out there who has found it worthy of your time to give us a 5-star rating. It's very humbling, and we're super grateful to you for that.
Yeah, that's honestly incredible.
Yeah.
Means the world to us.
Yeah. And if there are Apple podcast listeners out there that think Apple Podcast is better than Spotify, well, you're just going to have to prove it by going and giving us some ratings, and we'll see who is the better podcast listener. But the last thing we want to do is ask you for a very big favor. See, only you can prevent horrible How to Be a Better Dungeon Master episodes. And the way you do that is by going to betterdungeonmaster.com/feedback and give us feedback on these episodes. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. I was in a Facebook group the other day, and I posted our show, and I said, hey, give us some information on what you think. And one person said, I miss the old 7-minute episodes. I think your episodes are too long now. So that's something to consider. But if you like longer episodes, you need to tell us, or else we're going to do shorter episodes.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I'll keep that in mind for my other solo podcasts.
Exactly. But don't do anything drastic until we figure out what the listener actually wants, because that was just one voice.
Nope. I'm going to change everything due to one comment. Everything in my life.
I love that.
Just realize your power over me. Just everybody, you could say that my name is bad. Changing it. I'm changing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it.
What would you change it
just
to?
Kidding, I like
just
my name.
By the way.
No, I'm totally joking on that one. I actually really like the name Tanner.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I actually like my middle name too, Lewis, but with an EWIS.
Oh, I like that name too, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you got the last name, right? But
Yes.
I've always thought that Lewis would be a good first name, specifically spelled that way.
Yes.
Because I mean, there's a lot of Louis, and I'm like, Louis, I don't think is highly of, but Lewis is a first name. That's that's a good one. Otherwise, I mean, you gotta love Aragorn. I mean, just kidding.
Just change your name to Aragorn. Why not?
Never.
I mean, I might be tempted to, but I digress. Anyways, let's get to today's main topic, which is helping players who feel disengaged or who you feel disengaged to re-engage. And the first thing I want to start with, and then I'll let Tanner kind of go off and begin the points we want to bring up and the methods. But the first thing I want to bring up is that it's time for a reality check. At some point, whether before or after trying any of these tips, you might have to come to grips with the fact that maybe that one particular player you're trying to engage in the game doesn't actually want to play D&D. They might just be playing to make you happy, or they're giving it a try and they don't really grasp it yet, or it just isn't their thing. So when you get to a point when you don't know how to engage an unengaged player, ask them if they really want to play. And sometimes you'll just find out that D&D isn't for them. So with that reality check done, let's get into our tips for engaging unengaged players. Tanner, will you go first?
Yeah, and just as a caveat at the start of this, it's never wrong to, if a player's not enjoying themselves, obviously use the tips we're going to suggest now. But also, if they'd rather just back out gracefully, give them that chance, right? Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't seem like that's what they want, like they don't necessarily want to back out gracefully, they just want to be more engaged, then this is the podcast for you. But one thing that I thought was is very important for engaged players is, giving them more control, just more creative control in general, right? Because the whole idea about being engaged is, if you think about times in your personal life when you're unengaged, a lot of times it'll happen if you're in a conversation or, and you're not actually talking. I've had moments like that. I'm generally a very social person, but if I go out on a date with my wife with some friends of hers, and specifically I don't know the husband that well. He doesn't know me, but my wife knows his wife pretty well. Then sometimes they talk a lot, and I try and interject and be involved. But there are moments when I'm not a part of this conversation, I guess,
Yeah.
And it's times like that it gets easy to get unengaged. Now, when I'm able to contribute, and that's kind of the key word here, and I think a lot of our tips are going to deal with that. If you're able to contribute in a way that makes the game feel different, then your player will get re-engaged,
I like that a lot, actually. I know that personally for me, in school, whenever I've had to read things or study materials, it was really difficult for me when I felt the material didn't relate to me, when it was just kind of esoteric or ethereal. But when I found that I was reading about a topic that I could, like you said, or maybe not I could, but it would contribute to me, or because we're all in some ways self-centric. I like your idea of helping the player realize what they can do and helping them do more of that, and giving them more control. And I think that's a really good point. One other thing that I really like to do is, and I've thought about this specifically in terms of people with ADD, and it's a real thing. But people often characterize them as just people who struggle focusing, right? But one thing I've noticed is that they don't struggle focusing on everything. I've noticed that a lot of young boys, but in particular, who have ADD, manage to focus on video games for long periods of times, which means that they don't just have problems of focusing, they have problems focusing on certain things. So your unengaged player, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're an unengaged person, that they don't like doing things in general. So what I'd encourage you to do is try and figure out what actually interests them outside of D&D, what things fascinate them, what things they like. And if it's not obvious, you're going to have to do some kind of problem solving and analysis. But, ask them what sort of things they like to watch on TV. Ask them what video games they play. And if you need to, start trolling, or not trolling them, what's the word? Stalking them on social media. I guess you could troll them, but hopefully you do it in a nice way. But stalk them on social media.
Hey, you suck. Tell me what you like about games.
Exactly. But essentially, figure out stuff that they actually have interests in. For example, if someone was, or stalking me, gosh, why can't I remember that word? But if someone was stalking me on social media, they'd find out that, I spend time with my wife. I have hydroponic garden in my house, and I do 3D printing. And those are all facets that you can kind of dissect and put into a game because, and maybe I'm not the perfect example, but let's say someone has an interest in cars. Well, what's the best thing to do with that? Then you start putting mechanical monsters or problems into your game, and hopefully that should interest your uninterested person because it's bringing in one of their interests from outside of the game into the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it because I think there's so many aspects about. I mean, the great thing about D&D is that it's a whole world, right? That's why we have different skills that have nothing to do with fighting, right? Because there's so many things. It's essentially, you could treat it like life now, but just like in a fantasy world and like from, a few centuries ago. And that's what's amazing is like, hey, if they aren't down for just the typical talking to an NPC about, something quest related and then combat and then some exploration and treasure, I mean, I'm guessing they're going to be interested in some aspect of that, but it might get rote for them.
Yeah.
And they might get unengaged. If that's the case, be like, okay, well, let's spice this up. Let's throw in any of the numerous other things in life that make it interesting. And that kind of like, I think, like you said, finding out what TV shows they like, what video games, like different things like that. That's a great way to get started, and then you can find out what kind of themes they like in games. Like if they like Elden Ring or Game of Thrones, then, some of these darker themes might be their jam. And it's like, hey, got to tap into that more.
Exactly.
But if they're like, oh, no, I love like Aragon, then you're like, okay, so more of a light fantasy, more like typical, but like a lot more dragons, I guess. Whatever it is. And that's actually kind of leads into one of my tips, which is specifically like side arcs. Because the thing is, if someone's unengaged, maybe you've been stuck with the main campaign for too long, maybe they just feel like they've kind of been like pushed, railroaded in some aspect towards like, oh, the big bad and everything you as the DM have planned along the way. So just, take a pit stop. Instead, be like, okay, let's do a side arc where, I think DMs, like I was mentioning, they're a little protective of their work. And so they maybe don't allow players to be as creative because they're like, oh, I don't want my players to be creative in terms of coming up with like a really cool sword because that'll break the game, or be really creative in terms of like certain relationships or funny solves for things because like, oh man, I meant for this to be a hard battle. No, instead, like have a side arc that is like, you know what, they're on a boat and they are traveling upriver to go to a vacation island and everything goes wrong, but like they also like do a lot of ship type stuff, and it's kind of like them managing a ship, and that's like very different. But if they're people who are into Pirates of the Caribbean, that's their jam, and it's a nice little way to rekindle their creative spirit,
Agreed. And on the show, we talk a lot about the virtues of doing one-shots, and there's no harm in doing one-shots within the arc of your campaign. And they don't have to even be called one-shots. You essentially, you can take any of these one-shot type adventures, change things here and there, and put them within your campaign, as Tanner's saying, and you have a nice break, as it were, without really taking a break. And even, I just started watching the show Demon Slayer. Have you heard of that, Tanner?
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah,
it's girl with the bamboo thing in her mouth, has brother, that whole thing. Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's super popular right now, and I highly recommend it. But spoiler alert, in case you are planning on watching it, but around like episode, I don't even know, like episode 5, essentially, the main character goes to the big city and essentially meets the big bad boss, like face to face, right? And then the next episode, he does a little bit in the city, and then the next episode, he's basically, the way they work, they get missions from crows, essentially.
Yeah.
The crow tells him to leave the city and go do something else. And me as a very linear thinker, I'm thinking, wait, but the big bad guy's there. Why is he leaving? But the way the story goes, it's much more delightful because you know that there's this big bad guy in the background, and it's kind of building this tension, but it goes on this full long detour, which then turns out to not be a detour. So if you feel like putting in one of these kind of side arcs is jarring, don't feel that way, because it's not. At least if you don't make it that way.
Yeah, because you can still tie it back in, like at the end, into the big bad, or you just add it as like a wonderful little break. And like I had some. While I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, there's so many side arcs that you could do that would change everything up for a bit, right? For like 2 or 3 sessions. Like you could do a Squid Game style death game where it's like, oh, the players slept in an inn, they wake up, they're in the middle of an arena, or it's like, oh, your characters are obviously kind of done with like the combat and everything, and some of them have side hobbies. Maybe they get together to create a store or like a stand at a local farmer's market, and there's kind of a business rivalry, and that sounds like such a funny like little side thing where you can still do all the roles, maybe a combat or 2, but it's just totally a different flavor. And I think if you especially base the side arc off of something that you found out about that player, like you said earlier, then you got an engaged player immediately.
Agreed. And on the note of having them do stores or restaurants or things, part of me wonders if maybe some players become disengaged because they aren't aware of all the things that they actually can do with their character. Like, I wonder if my current group even knows that, they can start businesses or do things in between quests, and have these other non-quest related long-term goals. And so that might be something to also add in helping your players understand that they can do those things and helping them really expand their creativity. But let's do a quick intermission, hop back to our warm-up of earlier in the show. So Tanner, in this situation, you've created your character, your new kind of long-term NPC, but the player who said they were never going to come back has come back. And now you have to get rid of this extra character. How do you do it?
Okay. Going with the theme of our episode today about engaging players, what I would do is have the least engaged player go for an outing with Dunder, the halfling cleric. Dunder would be like, "Hey, I've noticed you've been down. No, you don't need to lie to me." Just like really be up in that person's face and be like, "You know what? Let me take you to my favorite place." And then his favorite place is a waterfall or something. I'm going to say waterfall here. Where when he was a kid, he would go a lot when his parents died. And, that's where he first started like falling in love with nature and feeling peace. And that kind of led him to his faith and why he became a cleric. So what's going to happen is he goes there and then they share like a good moment. And then out of the blue, something horrific happens, right? Like, for example, from the, maybe from the top of the waterfall, a giant rock falls. And then the player rolls a check and is able to escape. But Dunder doesn't. And he's just done. And then like the player looks up and there's like a shadow and someone obviously like left and had pushed it. Or you could go the more classic route and it's like, oh, there's a giant octopus arm that reaches out, grabs Dunder and just drags him away, and then I could always bring him back later.
It drags Dunder under. Is that what you're saying?
Dunder under. Yep, that's you got it. Yeah, we're just so in sync. I love this. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Dunder went under. Thunder. Yeah.
The thunderous waterfall.
Yep.
I love it. Well, continuing on with our tips for engaging your disengaged players. The last one I think I'm going to share today is secrets. And I think one way to help your unengaged player re-engage is to involve them in a conspiracy. Well, not really like a conspiracy, but kind of a conspiracy. Because everyone loves juicy secrets. So while you're at the table, try incorporating whispers to a singular player, or having everyone but one player leave the room, or text individual players. If you do that, I would say make it a little bit obvious that someone's getting a text with specific information, because even if your unengaged player isn't the player involved in the secret, they're still going to wonder. They're still going to be like, wait, what does that person know that I don't know? They're going to speculate as to what might be happening, and this is going to involve their mind and hopefully spark their curiosity, which triggers interest, if nothing else. And if you can't find a way to do it at the table, try to find ways to do it in between sessions. But if you do that, again, you're going to have to use the unengaged player as the accomplice, the person who knows the secrets. Otherwise, they're never going to know the secrets, because, you have to make curiosity or intrigue. And make sure to use phrases like, pretend you don't know this, or don't tell anyone else. Again, this kind of puffs them up a little bit and gives them a prompt for how they should role play. And everyone's lied a little bit, so they know how to do it. But it really kind of, you're feeding them a little bit of the intrigue and curiosity and interest that can help them spice up kind of how they're playing D&D.
Yeah, and even going along with that, I think allowing the secrets that you have with your characters to be substantial. I think that can, because going back to my original point, if you are so protective of your game that you don't include players in the creative process in a way that actually affects everybody else and affects the story, then they're not going to care. So if you give them a secret, it's like, oh my goodness, you found out there was 10 pieces of gold in a brick under the wall. That's not going to do anything, That's going to be like, oh, cool. So my character comes back and he's 10 gold richer.
Yep.
Whatever, versus being like, you actually were the person who killed that character's sister, and like you come up with that together and you like really try and keep that a secret, then that's like, that's some real meaty like engagement that you're going to get there, and it actually kind of like, it kind of brings up something that I thought of, which was, letting players create and or control NPCs. That's kind of like one of the biggest forms of secret keeping in the game, like, period, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I listen to a few tabletop, live play podcasts, and some of them, they have like improv, like people who are trained in improv, and what they're really good at is yes and, where they're like, oh, you got to get a lot of back and forth and kind of buying into the imagination. And some of them, like there's a specific podcast called the Campaign Podcast. They are very good at like, oh, if there's just some random throwaway NPC, they'll let a player like just jump in and pretend to be that shopkeeper, and it'll be hilarious, And so like, I think that things like that, or a more substantial kind of involvement, having the player play kind of a recurring side character, in addition to their main character, or even the villain, maybe not the huge villain, because, I know that's a lot, but like there's a lot of side mini bosses along the way, and having like a player kind of like pitch some to you, and then like, oh, you just every once in a while pepper that in, and they get to act like weird and maniacal and all the kind of things that we kind of wish we could do with our players, but we don't, with our characters, but we don't, because we don't want to ruin it for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Let them create an NPC with, and be creative as they want. If you're worried, do it on a side arc. It's like, oh, so they're making a bakery, and then the rival bakery that they're going to go to the fair and like compete against each other. Maybe the player, one of the players plays the baker, and he like has an accent and all that, he's kind of goofy. you just play with it. I think that's a great way to give players some change and also some creative license.
I really like that too. Anything to help the DM outsource is a good tip in my book, and that should take some time, effort, and stress off of your table, and hopefully put it back in the player's table, the player's hands, and actually make it more fun for them. So I really like that tip. So in conclusion, here are some tips to help you engage those unengaged players. There's probably a lot more tips. And actually, we'd encourage you to send those to us and open up a conversation. You can reach out to us on Instagram at HowToBeABetterDM, which is also the place where we will be having a giveaway coming up soon here. So keep an eye out for information on that. But thank you for being here, listener. Tanner, any parting words for our wayward adventurer today?
Honestly, I just hope that you guys have the best campaigns, and that the players who are engaged, are able to get that engagement and kind of liven up the game again, because I think that will make everybody happier.
Agreed. Make sure you have the best of campaigns, the best of sessions. We'll be back next week for the best of episodes. Until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative. Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.Rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.